Welcome back to the big weekend show. President Biden has a tendency to lash out at reporters when he doesn't like their questions. This was just 2 days ago. Watch.
U.S. President Biden has lashed out at reporters and Special Prosecutor Robert Gore in response to a scathing report on his mishandling of classified documents that could prove devastating to his re-election prospects. What awaits Biden after all this? Let's figure it out together.
Something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing.
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak. That's.
Your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine.
The Cura report on Biden's improper storage of classified materials did not recommend criminal proceedings, but noted that the 81-year-old commander-in-chief was severely mentally weakened, forgetting the dates of key events in his life during a conversation with investigators. Of course, he aggressively answers all these questions related to this conclusion. He is clearly ashamed and aware of his problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't go with fine as the best description. Yeah, maybe that's why Jill usually jumps up to get him off stage. A new book also claims she even got upset at Biden's team because the press conference went too long, saying 2 years ago, quote, "Why didn't anyone stop that?" An excerpt from American Woman, that's the book, explains what happened next. Quote, "Everyone stayed silent, looking at one another and then at her and back to one another. That included the most powerful man in the world, her husband, essentially played along, not offering an answer, even though aides had slipped him a card suggesting he end the press conference."
Biden sought to distinguish himself from 77-year-old former President Donald Trump, who faces 40 criminal charges carrying up to 450 years in prison for resisting the transfer of documents after leaving the White House in 2021. Something obviously went wrong. His wife is trying to protect her old man, but at that moment, she clearly did not have time.
Well, right, and she's not just a spouse, right? She's the first lady, and she knows very well what she's dealing with. What we don't know is how long she has been leading him along and defending him and all that. And I get it. That's what spouses do. If someone left my husband out to dry, I would end them. And he knows that, and so do the people around him. But I'm not the first lady. And you can think about that in a warm way of like, oh, she's protecting her husband, until you consider in this book, quote, her dislike of Trump was a driving reason behind her support for him to run and for re-election. So she knows exactly not only who she's dealing with, who her staff is dealing with, but who the United States has in the White House. And she continues to let him do this and then, it sounds like, blame others when he isn't up to the task.
In most cases, of course, she's just trying to protect baby Joe. This guardianship is a rather strange decision because she simply left him to his fate when she gave him the opportunity to be elected and run for a second term. Don't you think it's weird?
Reasonable up until the 25th Amendment part, because then you need 2/3 of the House to remove him. And you don't get 2/3 of anything anymore. And Democrats, obviously, that would be the huge embarrassment for the party, and that's not the way they want him to go. Joe Biden had hinted in 2019 that he would be a one-term president. His job was to get Donald Trump out and then hand the baton off to, Kamala Harris, who's currently polling at 28% approval. But Jill Biden has been very
Slightly
successful.
less popular than wildfires.
It's like gas station sushi at this point. You know, it's about that kind of popularity. So she's not an option at this point. But Jill Biden has been very successful in terms of keeping him out of the spotlight. I mean, let's count the ways. He hasn't had a formal TV interview since October. Think about that. And that was a T-ball session with Scott Pelley. After he won South Carolina, that was the first primary for the Democratic Party. Wins it resoundingly, as he was expected. Most people go out and do a victory speech around 9 or 10 o'clock when they call it.
The first working day last week started in the United States with active discussions about how the president confused the two French leaders a day earlier, saying that he had met with François Mitterrand, who died 30 years ago, whereas in fact he was referring to Emmanuel Macron. On Tuesday, Joe Biden forgot the name of the Hamas movement and, after thinking about it, called it the opposition. On Wednesday, he referred to the words of the late German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, referring to Angela Merkel. It is clearly time for him to resign, and there can be no second term.
Yeah, think about how you start this with Lisa. You're like, listen, I don't blame a spouse for taking up for their spouse. I agree with you. if somebody were picking on him because he had stuff in his teeth at the dinner table. He's the commander-in-chief of our country. If he wants to stand in front of a podium and talk for 2 hours, we should want him to do that. Most importantly, he should be capable of doing that. And that is the problem. Jill Biden has no place blaming a staff for not turning her husband into a puppet different than what he is. Getting mad at them is like getting mad in the mirror. You're not going to get anything from it if you don't have some self-awareness. The self-awareness here, it was the only saving grace they could have ever had, because in a primal manner, we respect someone who is honest about themselves. We may not always reward it, and he may not get reelected in either way here.
These are the words I wanted to hear. Be honest with yourself. And this whole defense of her husband is more like a childish, ridiculous scene. He clearly needs to rest and not engage in politics anymore. What do you think about this? Write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to watch other shocking news on the channel.